On his deathbed, the elderly millionaire made an unexpected request to the nurse. Be my daughter, just for today. The words had barely left his lips when the door swung open violently, revealing his wife in a state of shock. Her eyes reflected horror and disbelief. The air became heavy, the silence deafening. Something terrible was about to be revealed, but it was already too late. William's mansion resembled a forgotten castle, wrapped in silence and shadows. Inside, the 70-year-old man, once vigorous and feared in the business world, now lay in bed, a mere shadow of his former self. The atmosphere was stifling, marked by the constant presence of machines monitoring his failing health. His body was frail, his breathing irregular. Every movement seemed to drain a fraction of his life. Emily, a 25-year-old nurse, sat in an armchair by his bed, observing him. She had been called to care for him only a few days ago, without fully grasping the gravity of the situation. The few details she knew came from Karen, William's wife, a woman with a cold demeanor and calculating eyes, who seemed like a stranger in her own home. Since the moment Emily arrived, she had sensed a weight in the air, as if something darker was hidden beneath the surface. That morning, the atmosphere was even heavier. With a weak voice, William called Emily closer. I need to ask you something, Emily. A favor. His voice was barely a whisper, and the effort it took for him to speak was evident. The young nurse leaned closer, kneeling beside the bed, holding the frail hand of the man who just a few years ago had commanded empires. What can I do for you, Mr. William? She asked, trying to remain calm, though her heart was racing. In recent days, she had observed the tense relationship between him and Karen, and something told her that this request wouldn't be simple. William took a deep breath, fighting against the pain overwhelming him. I want you to pretend to be my daughter, just for a day. Emily froze in shock. Her eyes met his, and all she saw was desperation. I know it sounds strange, but I need you to do this for me. I don't have much time, and there are things that need to be settled. Emily blinked, trying to process what she had just heard. Why would you ask me something like this? He coughed lightly before answering. I lost my daughter many years ago, and now Karen. She wants me to sign documents that will ensure everything goes to her. But I no longer trust her. She doesn't care about my life, Emily. She only wants the money. I need someone trustworthy by my side, and when I look at you, I feel I can trust you. Please, Emily. The request seemed absurd, but the tone in his voice was sincere, almost desperate. Emily's mind wandered back to her own past. The lonely childhood in the orphanage, the cold nights, the emptiness she had always felt from not having a family. William's proposal resonated somewhere deep in her soul. Even without fully understanding the reasons behind such a request, she knew the old man was on the verge of despair. I don't know what to say, Mr. William, Emily murmured, her voice trembling. Why me? I'm just your nurse. He gently squeezed her hand, the gesture frail but full of meaning. Because you have something that reminds me of her. Maybe it's your eyes, or the way you take care of me. Please, just for one day. Emily hesitated, feeling the weight of the responsibility. It seemed like a dangerous game, and Karen's constant presence in the house made everything even more uncomfortable. But William looked so vulnerable, so dependent on that one favor. She took a deep breath. I accept. I'll do what you ask. A sigh of relief escaped William's lips. Thank you. You have no idea how much this means to me. At that moment, the bedroom door abruptly opened. Karen entered, wearing her usual cold expression. She cast a suspicious glance at Emily, as if she already knew something was going on. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice icy. Emily quickly stood up and took a step back, trying to mask the tension. "I was just checking Mr. Williams' vital signs." Karen narrowed her eyes, clearly distrustful. "Do what you have to do, and then leave us. I have important matters to discuss with my husband." Emily closed the door behind her, heart racing and hands trembling. The mansion's hallway was cloaked in a silence that made every beat of her heart echo. Sitting on the edge of an armchair in the foyer, she tried to process William's request. Her mind was in turmoil, trapped between the present and the past she had tried so hard to leave behind. From a young age, Emily knew what it meant to be alone. Abandoned as a baby, she grew up in an orphanage with no memories of her parents. She had learned early in life that she could only rely on herself. The nights in the orphanage were long and cold, and her only solace was found in her dreams of a better future. She often imagined what it would be like to find her family. Maybe there was a father or mother searching for her desperately. Perhaps they had simply been lost to each other. But as the years passed, those dreams began to fade, giving way to the harsh reality that she was alone in the world. Even so, Emily never stopped fighting. At 18, she left the orphanage and decided to study nursing. She had always wanted to help others, perhaps an unconscious attempt to fill the void inside her. Her determination led her to excel in her studies, and soon she earned her diploma. But like many, she discovered that the job market was not as easy as she had imagined. After several failed attempts to find stable employment, she found herself accepting any job that came her way, just to survive. Now, working for William, a dying millionaire, Emily felt on the brink of something far greater than any job she had ever done. The request he had made echoed in her mind, stirring up a pain she had tried to bury for years. Pretend to be someone's daughter. It was ironic. She, who had spent her entire life without a family, was now being asked to pretend to be the daughter of a man who seemed just as desperate as she was. As she walked down the mansion's hallway, Emily tried to ignore the memories of her past, but each step she took seemed to bring them back to the surface. She remembered her first night at the orphanage, lying down for the first time on a hard, cold bed, surrounded by other children as lost as she was. She remembered waking up in the middle of the night, crying for a family she had never known, and the few times she had been adopted, only to be returned like a toy that didn't work properly. Now, years later, she found herself in a luxurious mansion, surrounded by wealth, yet still without a family. Perhaps that's why William's request had touched her so deeply. The idea of pretending to be someone's daughter, even for a day, shook her in a way she couldn't explain. It was as if, for a brief moment, she could experience what she had always longed for. A father, a connection, someone who cared about her. Reaching her small room at the back of the mansion, Emily sat on the bed and closed her eyes. Her body was exhausted, not just from the physical work, but from the emotional weight she carried. She knew that by accepting William's request, she was stepping into a dangerous game. Karen was a shrewd woman, and something in her told her that Karen wouldn't let this situation go unnoticed. Even so, Emily couldn't deny the compassion she felt for William. There was something in his eyes, a silent desperation that touched her deeply. As she stared at the ceiling, the questions began to arise. Why had he asked her to pretend to be his daughter? What was the real reason? And more importantly, what was Karen planning? Emily wasn't naive. She knew there was more going on in that mansion than it seemed. But at that moment, what bothered her most was the fear that by getting too involved, she might lose herself in this maze of secrets and lies. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps in the hallway pulled her out of her thoughts. Emily got up and slightly opened the door, just in time to see Karen walking briskly toward William's office. The expression on Karen's face was cold and determined, as if she were about to carry out a meticulous plan. Emily closed the door again, feeling a chill run down her spine. She knew that somehow she was involved in something far bigger than she had expected. Sitting back on the bed, Emily took a deep breath. If she was going to pretend to be William's daughter, she would have to be careful. She didn't know how far Karen would go to ensure that her husband's fortune remained in her hands. Emily couldn't trust her, and she probably couldn't trust anyone else in that house either. Yet, deep down, there was something greater driving her to move forward. Perhaps it was the opportunity to feel, even if just for a day, what it would be like to have a father. Or maybe it was the sense that, for the first time in her life, she had the chance to change destiny, hers and someone else's. Either way, Emily knew there was no turning back now. She glanced at the clock. Soon, she would have to return to William's room. And this time, she wouldn't be just his nurse. The tension in William's mansion grew with each passing day, as the millionaire's health seemed to deteriorate slowly. Emily noticed that something much deeper was at play. It wasn't just William's illness that concerned her, but also Karen's behavior. The woman, with her impeccable posture and sharp gaze, seemed more interested in the documents and control of the fortune than in her husband's well-being. William spent most of his time in bed, growing weaker by the day, and Emily dedicated herself to caring for him with all the attention she could give. There was something about the silence in that house, the shadows that stretched down the corridors, that made her uneasy. Even so, the connection she was beginning to develop with William kept her going. She knew she had promised to pretend to be his daughter, but as the days passed, the line between pretense and reality began to blur. That afternoon, after checking William's vital signs, Emily noticed something that deeply unsettled her. He was paler than usual, and his breathing, already weak, seemed increasingly irregular. Worried, she adjusted his position on the bed and tried to talk to him. "Mr. William, how are you feeling today?" she asked, her voice soft and full of concern. William opened his eyes slowly, his voice a tired whisper. "I don't know how much longer I have, Emily, but having you here makes things easier." Emily held his hand, trying to hide her unease. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He gave a faint smile, and for a moment, it seemed like he was about to say something important. But before he could continue, the door to the room swung open with a bang. Karen entered, her heels echoing across the room, her gaze slicing through Emily like a blade. "What are you doing here, Emily?" Karen asked, her voice icy. "I told you to let William rest." Emily tried to stay calm, but Karen's presence always made her uncomfortable. "I was just checking on him." Karen narrowed her eyes, ignoring the answer. she approached William's bed, showing no affection. Instead, she seemed more focused on the papers she held in her hands. "William, I need you to sign these documents. They're urgent matters that can't wait." William, struggling, tried to sit up in bed, but was too weak. Emily stepped forward to help him, but Karen interrupted, placing her hand on William's shoulder in a brusque manner. "I'll handle this," she said, almost like a command. Emily's distrust of Karen grew stronger with each passing day. Something about that woman wasn't right, and her behavior made Emily suspect that something far more sinister was at play. The way Karen treated William, as if he were merely a pawn in her game, left a knot in Emily's stomach. "I don't think this is the right time for this, Karen," Emily dared to say, trying to intercede for William. "He's not well enough." Karen slowly turned, her eyes as cold as ice. "You're just a nurse, Emily. It's not your place to decide what's best for my husband." Emily felt her face flush with the anger she was holding back, but she knew that confronting Karen directly would be dangerous, so she remained silent, though her heart pounded. She knew Karen was pressuring William for some dark reason, and it disturbed her deeply. William, struggling to speak, raised his hand in a weak gesture. Not now, Karen," he murmured, his voice barely audible. I need to rest." Karen pursed her lips, clearly irritated by his resistance. She placed the paper on the bedside table and turned to Emily. "Do as he says, but remember, you have no place here. This house, this life, all of it is mine, and it will remain mine, no matter what you do." With those words, she left the room, leaving Emily alone with William. The air felt heavier now, as if something was about to collapse. Emily sat beside William, his face pale and sweaty. "She's wrong, Emily," William said, his voice barely a whisper. I still have control over my life, and you're the only person I trust now." Emily gently squeezed William's hand, feeling the weight of the responsibility he was placing on her shoulders. "I won't let her hurt you, Mr. William. You have my word." William closed his eyes, exhausted, but the expression of relief on his face said it all. That night, the mansion's silence was broken only by the soft sound of the wind rustling through the trees in the garden. Emily stood by William's bedside, watching his sleeping face. He seemed so fragile, as if a single touch could break him. She sighed deeply, knowing something was very wrong in that house. Since she had agreed to pretend to be William's daughter, the tensions had only escalated. And now, with Karen constantly pressuring him to sign documents, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that more secrets lay beneath the surface. After ensuring that William was comfortable, she left the room to head to the kitchen for some water. But as she walked through the dimly lit corridors, she heard voices coming from the office downstairs. She paused for a moment, curious, and recognized Karen's voice. The other voice, however, was male and unfamiliar. Driven by suspicion, Emily quietly descended the stairs and approached the slightly ajar door of the office. Now, she could clearly hear the conversation. "He doesn't have much time, Karen. We need to move quickly. If he dies without signing the will, you'll get nothing. Everything will go to charity, and you know what that means." The man's voice was cold and calculating. A chill ran down Emily's spine. Karen was planning something, but what exactly? She leaned in a bit closer to listen. Karen responded impatiently. "I know that, which is why I need him to sign the papers now. But that nurse is getting in the way. William seems to trust her completely. And what's worse, He's becoming more attached. I need to find a way to get rid of her before she interferes any further. Emily recoiled, her heart racing. Karen was plotting something against her, and against William too. Those words confirmed all her suspicions. Karen didn't care about her husband, only about the fortune he would leave behind, and now she saw Emily as a threat. Silently, Emily hurried back up the stairs, trying to process what she had just overheard. When she reached her room, she locked the door and sat on the bed, her mind spinning. She needed to protect William, but how? Karen was manipulative and had control over almost everything in the house. If Emily exposed herself, she could lose not only her job, but also any chance of helping William. But as she thought about what to do, an idea began to form in her mind. She needed to find some proof of what Karen was planning. If she could get something concrete, she could confront her or even alert the authorities. In the following days, Emily started paying close attention to Karen and her movements. She noticed that Karen spent hours locked in the office and often received visits from a lawyer. The same man Emily had overheard the previous night. But she couldn't act without proof. The tension grew, and each encounter between Emily and Karen was filled with distrust. Then, during one of her night rounds, Emily made a discovery that would change everything. Entering Karen's office while she was out for an appointment, Emily found an envelope on the desk with William's name on it. Upon opening it, she discovered a DNA test. The content of the document left her speechless. William had a missing daughter. Emily felt a lump in her throat as she read those words. William had mentioned losing his daughter many years ago, but she never imagined he had such concrete evidence. As she flipped through the papers, she realized that Karen was aware of this information and was doing everything in her power to keep it a secret. William's will indicated that if his daughter were found, she would inherit his entire fortune, and Karen obviously didn't want that to happen. The impact of the discovery was immediate. Emily knew William trusted her, but now she understood why he was desperate to find his daughter, and somehow saw something in Emily that made him believe she could be that person. She didn't know how to process this possibility. Could she be William's lost daughter? The idea seemed absurd, yet at the same time, it made sense. With her heart racing, Emily placed the papers back and left the office. She didn't know what to think. Was fate playing a trick on her? Or was this just a cruel coincidence? She couldn't share her doubts with William without concrete proof, but the uncertainty began to eat away at her. If she really was his daughter, everything would change. That night, while William slept, Emily approached his bed and, with her voice shaking with emotion, whispered to herself, "What if I'm his daughter? What do I do now?" Emily barely slept that night. Her heart was full of doubts, and her mind was restless. The thoughts about the DNA test and Karen's manipulative behavior tormented her. She needed to act, but any wrong move could mean her expulsion from the mansion, or worse, William's complete downfall. The next morning, as she cared for William, the tension in the air was palpable. He seemed even more fragile, as if each day was a silent battle against time. Despite this, when he looked at Emily, there was something in his eyes, a calm trust she had never seen before. "Emily," he whispered, his voice weak but determined. "There's something I need to tell you. Something you deserve to know." She moved closer, holding his hand, and nodded. "I'm here, Mr. William. Whatever you want to say, you can tell me." He closed his eyes for a moment as if gathering strength. I had a daughter. A long time ago. She was taken from me, and I never saw her again. I spent years looking for her, but never found her. Recently, something changed. I discovered that maybe she's still out there. And now, I don't know how much time I have left. Emily's heart tightened. He was about to reveal the truth, but she already knew everything. What are you trying to tell me, Mr. William? She asked, her voice soft but anxious. He looked into her eyes, his own tired but filled with emotion. From the moment you walked through that door, I felt something different. I felt that somehow you could be my daughter. I know it might sound crazy, but that's what my heart tells me. And now, with Karen pressuring me to sign these papers, I need someone I trust. Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes. Part of her had already suspected this, but hearing the words directly from William shook her deeply. She had been abandoned in an orphanage and never knew her biological family. And now, the possibility that William might be her father. It was surreal. Mr. William, she began, her voice trembling. Do you think that I could be your daughter? The daughter you lost? He gently squeezed her hand with what little strength he had left. I'm not sure, Emily, but deep down, I feel that you might be. And if it's true, I need to protect you from Karen. She would do anything to make sure I sign those papers, and I can't let that happen. Emily took a deep breath, trying to absorb the weight of the revelation. She knew the only way to uncover the truth would be to confront Karen and stop her sinister plans. But that would mean exposing what she had discovered about the DNA test. If William found out she already knew and had read the documents, it might be too late to prevent anything. Before she could respond, the bedroom door suddenly opened and Karen entered with a lawyer by her side. She was carrying a stack of papers in her hands, and the smile on her face was as cold as the wind blowing outside. William? Karen said sweetly, but with a hint of malice. I brought the lawyer so we can finalize the details of the will. It's best to sign now, before things get worse. Emily stood up quickly, her heart racing. She looked at Karen and then at the lawyer, who seemed as indifferent as William's own wife. She couldn't let this happen. Not now, knowing what she did. This can't be done right now, Emily said firmly, stepping between William and the papers. He's too weak. He needs to rest. Karen chuckled softly, but the disdain in her tone was clear. I don't think this is any of your business, Emily. You're just a nurse. His condition isn't relevant at this moment. We're dealing with important matters here. Important matters for whom? Emily shot back, the anger rising in her chest. You're only interested in the money. You don't care about your husband's health. He still has a voice. He can still decide. Karen stepped forward, coming face to face with Emily. Her eyes were like ice, and her voice became as sharp as a blade. Listen here, girl. I know exactly what you're trying to do. Don't think for a second that you stand a chance here. William will sign these papers today, and you will walk out of this house with nothing. The lawyer, observing the tense exchange between the two women, began flipping through the documents, seemingly indifferent to the conflict. But Emily knew this was the moment to act. If she didn't do something now, William would be forced to sign a will that left everything to Karen. Suddenly, William, with effort, raised his voice. I will not sign anything, not while I still have the strength to fight. Karen turned to him, irritated. You're delirious, William. Don't be foolish. This is what's best for everyone. Before Emily could react, William began coughing violently, his breathing becoming increasingly labored. Emily rushed to help him, adjusting his position and trying to calm him down. She knew he was on the verge of collapsing. "He needs medical help," Emily shouted at Karen, who only looked on indifferently. "He needs to sign the will. That's what he needs," Karen muttered coldly, advancing toward the bed with the papers in hand. Without thinking twice, Emily pulled William close to her and in a desperate gesture said, "I am his daughter, and I won't let you destroy him." The truth was about to explode, and the consequences of this confrontation would be devastating. The room fell into complete silence. Emily's abrupt declaration had cut through the air like a sharp blade. She could feel Karen's eyes burning into her, and although panic gripped her, she stood firm. William, weak and struggling to breathe, looked at her with a mixture of surprise and hope. Karen, however, couldn't contain herself. She let out a bitter laugh, a sarcastic sound that echoed through the walls of the mansion. "His daughter? You? That's ridiculous." She stepped forward, staring Emily down with disdain. "You think you can just waltz in here and pretend to be someone you're not? To steal what's mine?" Emily's heart raced, but she didn't back down. She knew she was nearing a point of no return. If she wanted to save William, she would have to face Karen head-on. "I don't want his money, Karen. I just want him to be safe. And you clearly don't care about that." Karen narrowed her eyes. "I care more than you can imagine. Everything I'm doing is for his own good. He's old, weak, he can't make clear decisions. And you, a mere nurse, think you can stop me?" "I'm not just a nurse," Emily replied, her voice steady. "I've seen what you're doing. The documents, the will. You want everything for yourself. And you're willing to sacrifice his life to get it." William coughed again, and Emily rushed to adjust his position. As she did, she cast a quick glance at the lawyer, who seemed uncomfortable with the situation but remained silent. He was there to follow Karen's instructions. "This can't go on like this," Emily said, more to herself but loud enough for everyone to hear. She needed to buy time to find a way out of this situation without putting William's life at even greater risk. Then an idea struck her. The DNA test. She knew it was in Karen's office. If she could show William that there was concrete proof he had a daughter, maybe even her, it could change everything. But before she could plan her next move, Karen stepped forward. "I'm done with these games," Karen said coldly, moving toward the bed. She gripped the will papers tightly, as if they were her only connection to William's fortune. "He's going to sign now, and you're going to leave." Emily felt a surge of adrenaline. She knew she had to act fast. "I need proof," she thought. "I can't let her do this." Before Karen could force William to sign, Emily made a desperate decision. "Mr. William, you can't sign those papers." She leaned toward him, her voice pleading. "Please trust me. I know it's confusing, but I found something important." William, weak and struggling to keep his eyes open, tried to speak, but his voice was barely a whisper. "Emily, what did you find?" "A DNA test," she responded quickly. "It proves you have a daughter, and I think I might be her." The shock on Karen's face was immediate. She knew exactly what Emily was talking about, and it made her furious. "You can't be serious," Karen said with disdain. "You think you can just make something up and get away with it?" Emily stood her ground. I saw the documents in your office, Karen. You knew all along that he had a daughter, and you kept it a secret to ensure everything would go to you. Karen's expression shifted from disdain to hatred. You don't know anything. This has nothing to do with you. She stepped forward again, but before she could reach the bed, William raised his hand. A weak gesture, but one that stopped Karen in her tracks. I won't sign anything, William said with effort, his voice barely audible but resolute. Not until I know the truth. Karen stood still for a moment, surprised by the strength he could still muster. But then she glared at him, her eyes filled with fury. You're making a mistake, William. A mistake that will cost you dearly. Emily knew Karen was cornered now. The only thing that could truly protect William was revealing the documents she had discovered. But how could she do that without Karen reacting even more aggressively? And then, the unexpected happened. The bedroom door burst open, and 2 mansion security guards entered, followed by the lawyer, who now looked nervous. Miss Karen, I think that's enough. It's time to stop this. Emily looked at the lawyer in surprise, who finally seemed to decide that he no longer wanted to be part of this dirty scheme. He turned to William and, with a more respectful tone, said, Mr. William, I'm sorry for anything that has happened. If you'd like, we can postpone this signing until you feel better. Karen was furious, but seeing that even the lawyer was hesitating, she realized she was running out of options. She glared at Emily with a look that promised revenge. You won't get away with this, she muttered before storming out of the room, the security guards following her. The room fell silent again, and Emily felt her body relax for the first time since she had entered the house. She knew there was still much to resolve, but at least for now, William was safe. She moved closer to the bed and took William's hand once more. I'll find out the truth, Mr. William. I promise. He smiled faintly, exhausted but with a look of gratitude in his eyes. Thank you, Emily. Or perhaps, my daughter. Emily's heart raced. The truth was close, and now she had a new path to follow. Sitting on the small sofa in her room, she held the document she had found in Karen's office, the DNA test that confirmed the existence of William's daughter. She still hadn't shown it to him. A part of her didn't know how to approach the topic. What if she wasn't the daughter? What would that mean for her life? Or worse, if it were true, how would she cope with the revelation? Emily sighed deeply and placed the paper on the table. She needed to think clearly. Her protective instinct toward William was growing stronger by the minute, but there were still too many things that didn't make sense. Determined to uncover the truth, she knew her only option was to act before Karen made another move. At the core of it all, one question lingered. How far was Karen willing to go to ensure the inheritance stayed with her? The next morning, Emily went to William's room to begin her usual care routine. He looked pale, but when he saw her, he smiled faintly, though the exhaustion was evident in his eyes. Good morning, Mr. William, she said softly, adjusting the pillows around him. How are you feeling today? A little better, he replied, his voice still weak, but with a lightness that hadn't been there in recent days. Thank you for being here. I know these last few days haven't been easy for you. Emily shook her head. Don't worry about me. What matters most is your health and making sure you're well taken care of. William looked at her with gratitude. You've been more than a nurse to me, Emily. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come into my life." Emily hesitated for a moment. She knew she needed to talk about what she had discovered, but she didn't know how to begin. "Mr. William," she finally said, her voice a bit shaky, "I need to talk to you about something important." He looked up, surprised by the seriousness in her tone. "What is it, Emily? Has something happened?" She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the words she was about to say. I found something that could change everything." William furrowed his brow, clearly confused. "What do you mean?" Emily took out the document she had been holding on to and handed it to him. "I found this in Karen's office. It's a DNA test. It confirms that you have a daughter, one you lost a long time ago." William took the paper in his trembling hands, his eyes struggling to read the words. The room seemed to grow even quieter as he processed the revelation. I didn't know she had this document," he murmured, his voice filled with emotion. "I spent so many years searching for my daughter, and Karen knew all along. She kept this from me." Emily nodded, seeing the pain in William's face. "I know, Mr. William, and I believe she tried to keep you from finding out to ensure everything would go to her." The shock on William's face was evident. "I trusted her, Emily. I thought she was my partner. She betrayed that trust," Emily said firmly. "She wanted you to sign those documents to make sure the inheritance would go to her, even though she knew about your daughter. And there's something else I need to tell you." William looked up, waiting, and Emily felt her heart rise. She knew she was about to step into delicate territory, but it was necessary. "Mr. William," she began slowly, I don't know how to say this, but I think I might be your daughter." The silence that followed was overwhelming. William stared at her for a few moments, speechless, trying to process what she had just said. "My daughter?" he murmured, as if he needed to repeat it to believe it. "I grew up in an orphanage, Mr. William," Emily continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I never knew my parents. I never knew where I came from. And when I saw this DNA test, something inside me told me that maybe, just maybe, I could be the person you've been looking for." William remained silent, his emotions raw. "Emily," he began, his voice weak, "if you really are my daughter, my God, I've spent so long searching for you." Emily felt tears well up in her eyes. The weight of the possible truth hit her hard. If she really was William's daughter, it would explain everything. The connection they felt, the way he treated her. But there were still so many doubts, so many unanswered questions. "I don't know if I am," she said, struggling to hold back the tears. "But there's a chance, and I want to find out the truth." William squeezed her hand with the little strength he had left. "If you are my daughter, Emily, everything changes. You are the only thing that truly matters to me now, and I won't let Karen or anyone else interfere with that." Emily felt a mixture of relief and fear. The possibility of being William's daughter was overwhelming, but at the same time, it brought a sense of belonging she had never felt before. And now, more than ever, she was determined to protect this man, her possible father, from any threat. "I'll protect you, Mr. William," she promised. "No matter what happens, I'll do whatever it takes to make sure the truth comes out." William smiled, his eyes filled with emotion. "Thank you, Emily. Or maybe, my daughter." But Emily knew the danger was far from over. Karen was still a looming threat, and with the will unsigned, she would likely stop at nothing to ensure William didn't survive long enough to learn the truth. The door to William's room opened slowly, interrupting the emotional moment between them. Karen entered, followed by the lawyer and 2 security guards. Her cold expression stood in stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions William and Emily were feeling. "So, what's the drama today?" Karen asked with disdain, her eyes darting between William and Emily. "Do you two really think you can fool me with this ridiculous story?" Emily stood firm. "I know everything, Karen. You've been hiding the truth from William all this time. You knew he had a daughter, but you chose to keep it secret to ensure the fortune stayed with you." Karen let out a cold laugh. "You're more naive than I thought, Emily. You think you can just show up here, pretend to be his daughter, and take everything from me. You have no proof of anything. And even if you did, do you think any court would listen to a mere nurse?" William tried to sit up in bed, his raspy voice cutting through the tension. "I won't sign anything, Karen." Karen's face twisted in frustration, but she quickly regained her composure. "You're dying, William. There's no escaping that. And you know that without this will, I'm the only one who can make sure your fortune is well taken care of. Or would you rather it end up in the hands of someone who's not even part of your life?" Emily couldn't believe the level of coldness in Karen's words. She stepped closer to William, positioning herself between him and his wife like a protective shield. "You're not interested in the fortune, Karen. You just want to make sure no one else has what you want. But I won't let that happen." The security guard stepped forward, as if ready to intervene. But the lawyer, who had already sensed the gravity of the situation, raised his hand, signaling them to wait. He looked uncomfortable with the tension in the room. "Mrs. Karen," the lawyer said calmly, "perhaps it would be better to give Mr. William some time to recover. Forcing the signature in such a delicate state of health could raise suspicions later. The law's clear on that." Karen shot him a furious look. "You work for me. Don't forget that. I decide when this ends." Emily could feel the desperation rising inside her. She knew Karen was losing control, and that made her even more dangerous. But there was something Emily hadn't tried yet. The one thing that might make Karen hesitate. She took a deep breath and said, "I've already contacted the authorities, Karen." Karen froze, her expression instantly hardening. "What?" "I have the DNA test," Emily continued, her voice steady. "And it proves that William has a daughter. Maybe it's not me, but there is an heir. And if you keep pressuring him to sign this will without the truth coming out, you'll end up in prison, Karen, for attempted fraud and abuse against an incapacitated man." The color drained from Karen's face, and for a brief moment, she seemed to lose control. Emily could tell she had struck a nerve, but she also knew this meant Karen could react unpredictably. "You're lying," Karen growled, stepping toward Emily. "You don't have the guts to follow through with this story. You have nothing." Emily stood her ground. "I have everything. Everything I need. And if you take one more step, I'll make sure everyone knows what you tried to do here." William tried to speak, but the tension was too much for him to bear. He began coughing violently, his breathing growing more difficult with each passing second. Emily immediately turned to help him, adjusting his position in the bed as Karen stood by, frozen with fury and fear. "Please, Mr. William," Emily murmured. "Breathe deeply. I'm here." William's eyes, filled with gratitude, locked onto Emily's. He tried to say something, but his voice failed him. Finally, he managed to whisper, "I trust you." Emily felt tears well up. She held William's hand, knowing he was on the verge of collapse. But even in his weakened state, he placed his trust in her. He wanted the truth, and she was determined to uncover it, no matter the cost. Karen, realizing she was losing control of the situation, turned to the security guards. "Take her out of here. She no longer has a place in this house." Before the guards could act, the lawyer, who had been silently observing until now, finally stepped in. "Mrs. Karen, I suggest you stop right now. We cannot continue like this. If Emily is telling the truth, and there is a DNA test that proves the existence of a daughter, pressing forward could lead to severe legal consequences." Karen shot the lawyer a deadly glare, but he stood his ground. "It is my duty to ensure everything is done within the bounds of the law. I cannot allow Mr. William to sign anything unless he is in full possession of his mental faculties." The entire room seemed frozen in time. Karen hesitated, furious and out of options. Emily knew that at that moment, the balance was starting to tip in her favor. But Karen was unpredictable, and any wrong move could be fatal for William. "You haven't won yet," Karen hissed before storming out of the room, followed by the security guards. The door slammed shut, its echo reverberating throughout the house. After Karen's abrupt exit, the silence in the room felt even more oppressive. Emily breathed deeply, trying to process everything that had just happened. Karen's presence had been overwhelming, and every word exchanged carried a tension that threatened to explode at any moment. But for now, William was safe, and that was all that mattered. William, lying in bed, struggled to collect himself. He had lost much of his strength in the past few weeks, and the emotional toll was clearly weighing on him. Emily moved closer to the bed and adjusted the pillows to make him more comfortable. She picked up a glass of water and offered it to him, her expression full of concern. I'm sorry for all of this, Mr. William," she said softly. "If I had known things would get so tense, I would have handled it differently." William weakly shook his head. "You're not to blame, Emily. If anything, you're helping me more than you realize." Emily's heart tightened. She knew William was grateful, but she could also see that he was deteriorating quickly. The possibility that he might not survive much longer was real and painful. She knew she had to act fast, and her priority now was uncovering the truth. "Mr. William," she began, her voice steady, "I need you to know that I'm not going to give up on finding your daughter. If it's me, I'll prove it. If it's not, we'll find her. But you can't let Karen win." William closed his eyes for a moment, as if processing her words. When he opened them again, there was a quiet determination in his gaze. "I know you will do what's right, Emily. I always knew." Emily smiled, though it was brief. She knew the battle was far from over. With Karen now more desperate than ever, any misstep could cost them everything. She needed to find out what else Karen was hiding. And fast. That night, as William finally drifted off to sleep, Emily made a decision. She couldn't wait much longer. Karen had something else up her sleeve, and the key to everything was likely in the mansion's office. Though it was risky, Emily knew that if she wanted to protect William, she would have to face Karen again. This time with undeniable proof. The house was shrouded in darkness as Emily slipped out of William's room and made her way toward the office. Each step seemed louder than normal, and the echo of her shoes on the marble floor made her feel as though she were being watched. She reached the office and, after a quick glance around to ensure she was alone, turned the doorknob and stepped inside. The office was an imposing room, lined with bookshelves and a large desk in the center. Emily knew Karen kept her most important documents here, including William's will and possibly more information about the DNA test. She approached the desk and began searching through the drawers. Her search was slow but methodical. She found folders filled with financial papers, medical reports, and finally, a folder that seemed promising. Opening it, she found William's will, already prepared for signing. However, what caught her eye was another sheet tucked at the back of the folder. It was another DNA report. With trembling hands, she picked up the document and began reading. What she found left her breathless. It was the result of a more recent test, commissioned by Karen, confirming the identity of William's daughter. The name on the paper, however, wasn't Emily's. The report identified a young woman named Alyssa, who had been adopted by a family after her biological mother had left her at the hospital. Emily felt a mix of relief and sadness. She wasn't William's daughter, but there was a daughter, and Karen had known where she was all along. Emily sat for a moment, trying to process the discovery. Now that she knew the name of William's real daughter, she had a new mission. Find Alyssa before Karen could take any drastic action. She knew Karen was willing to do anything to secure the inheritance, and if she realized Emily was close to the truth, things could get even more dangerous. Suddenly, she heard a noise behind her. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Emily quickly placed the papers back into the folder and stood up, trying to appear casual. Before she could leave the office, the door swung open, revealing Karen. Karen's eyes narrowed as she saw Emily standing there. "What are you doing in my office, Emily?" she asked, her voice dripping with suspicion. Emily's heart raced, but she tried to keep her composure. I was looking for additional medical instructions for Mr. William. I wanted to make sure he was getting the best care possible. Karen crossed her arms, clearly not buying the excuse. "You think you can fool someone, but not me. I know exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to find something against me, aren't you?" Emily took a deep breath, knowing this was her chance to confront Karen once and for all. "I don't have to search for much, Karen. I already know the truth." Karen took a step forward, her gaze becoming even more threatening. "And what truth would that be, dear nurse? I know that William has a real daughter, and I know you've kept it a secret all along, hoping he would die without ever finding out." For a brief moment, Karen seemed to lose control, but she quickly regained her composure, letting out a bitter laugh. "Do you really think this discovery is going to help you? Even if you found something, who's going to believe you?" Emily raised her chin, determined. "I'm going to tell William everything. And whether I am or am not his daughter, he deserves to know the truth." Karen stepped closer, her eyes cold and calculating. "If you utter a single word, I'll make sure you pay dearly for it. You have no idea what you're up against." Emily, however, did not back down. "I've faced enough, Karen. Now it's your turn to deal with the consequences." Without giving any more room for threats, Emily left the office, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened. The morning arrived cold and quiet, but in William's mansion, the tension was palpable. Emily knew time was running out, Now, with the revelation that Alyssa was William's daughter, she needed to find a way to bring her to him before Karen could act. As William still fought to survive, Emily felt closer than ever to finally exposing the entire truth. She spent the morning by William's side, caring for him with all the dedication she could muster. He was weaker, his voice almost inaudible, but still, his eyes showed a silent determination. Emily knew he wouldn't give up, not until he knew the whole truth about his daughter. Deep down, William wanted one last chance to reconcile with his past. "Emily," William whispered, his voice trembling. "I trust you. I just need to know my daughter before it's too late." Emily held his hand gently, feeling the frailty in his fingers. "I promise, Mr. William, I will bring your daughter to you." With her decision made, Emily knew what had to be done. There was no more time to lose. She rose from the bed and left the room with determined steps, set on resolving everything before Karen could stop her. She knew Karen was somewhere in the mansion, probably plotting her next move, but Emily couldn't wait. With the name Alyssa in hand, she called every local adoption agency until she found a lead. It wasn't easy, but after several hours of calls, she got in touch with Alyssa, who had been adopted by a family in another town. Without hesitation, Emily briefly explained the situation and asked Alyssa to come to the mansion as soon as possible. "Alyssa, I know this all seems confusing, but you need to trust me. William, your father, is very ill. He needs to see you before it's too late." On the other end of the line, Alyssa seemed hesitant, but something in Emily's voice convinced her. I'll come. I want to know the truth too." With that, the plan was set in motion. Emily knew it wouldn't be easy, but now, with Alyssa on her way, things were finally starting to fall into place. The only thing left was to keep Karen away long enough for William and his real daughter to meet without interference. As she waited for Alyssa's arrival, Emily returned to William's room, trying to stay calm. She knew she was about to face Karen one last time. What she didn't expect was that William's wife had already anticipated her moves. When Emily entered William's room, she found Karen already there, standing beside the bed. Karen's expression was one of pure rage, as if she knew Emily was about to ruin her plans for good. Karen took a step forward, her voice sharp. "You don't think you've won, do you? I know what you did, Emily. You brought that girl here. But she will never truly be William's daughter. You're not taking what's mine." Emily remained calm, but she knew this was the decisive moment. "She is his daughter, Karen, and you've known it all along. You hid the truth from William because you wanted the fortune for yourself. But now, it's over. Alyssa is on her way, and you won't stop this reunion." Karen stepped closer, her fury growing. "Do you really think he's going to survive long enough to see this girl? He's dying, Emily, and I will make sure he doesn't suffer anymore. The will is going to be signed, and all of this will end." Before Karen could do anything, the door to the room opened, revealing Alyssa standing in the doorway. The silence that followed was heavy, and William's eyes slowly opened at the sound of the unfamiliar voice entering the room. "Alyssa?" William whispered, his voice barely audible but full of emotion. The young woman stood frozen for a moment, shocked to see the man she had never known. The man who could be her father. Karen, seeing the young woman standing there, seemed to lose control. "You can't be here. He's not your father," Karen shouted, rushing toward Alyssa. Emily acted quickly, placing herself between the two. "That's enough, Karen. No more lies. Alyssa deserves to know the truth, and William deserves to see his daughter before it's too late. Karen stopped, trembling with rage, but realized she had lost control of the situation. The lawyer, who had been standing at the door, watched everything with a serious expression. He knew Karen's game was over. Karen let out a frustrated sigh, knowing her battle was lost. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice filled with bitterness. Before leaving the room, with Karen gone, Alyssa approached William's bed. The reunion was charged with emotion. William, weak and struggling to breathe, looked at Alyssa with tears in his eyes. "I thought I'd never see you," he whispered, reaching out a hand to her. Alyssa, equally emotional, took William's hand and smiled softly. "I never knew, but I'm here now." Emily watched the scene with tears in her eyes. After everything, William had finally found his daughter, and she knew this was the moment he had been waiting for. The reunion was brief but deeply meaningful. In the days that followed, William, Alyssa, and Emily spent all the time they could together, sharing stories and memories they had never had the chance to live. William's health, however, continued to decline, and soon it was time to say goodbye. On the last day of his life, William held both Emily's and Alyssa's hands, and with a peaceful smile, whispered, "Now I can rest in peace." He closed his eyes for the final time, surrounded by the love of his lost daughter and the young woman who, even without being blood-related, had become part of the family. Karen was prosecuted and faced the consequences of her actions, while Alyssa inherited her father's fortune, ensuring that William's dreams and legacy lived on. Emily, in turn, stayed by Alyssa's side, helping to manage the estate and continuing to care for people, just as she always had. In the days following William's passing, the mansion, once full of secrets and tension, transformed into a place of memories and gratitude. Alyssa and Emily, now united by a bond that transcended blood, found comfort in each other. The sadness of William's loss still lingered, but at the same time, a new hope was born. Sitting in the mansion's garden, under the soft afternoon sun, Alyssa looked at Emily with a grateful smile. "I never imagined I'd find my real family like this after so long." Emily smiled back, feeling the warmth of the moment. "Neither did I. But William, he gave us this chance. He believed in something greater even when everything seemed impossible." Karen, with her control broken, had finally been held accountable for her actions. Her attempts to manipulate and control William's fate had been exposed, and she faced justice for everything she had done. With the inherited fortune, Alyssa decided to honor her father's legacy, investing in causes William had loved, foundations to support orphan children and medical research institutions, ensuring that his name lived on. Emily, for her part, felt that she had found her place in the world. Although she wasn't William's biological daughter, he had given her something she had never had: a family. She and Alyssa became inseparable, building a new life out of love, loyalty, and the lessons they had learned together. One afternoon, as they walked along the beach, the place where William had always dreamed of spending his final days in peace, Emily stopped and looked out at the horizon. The sound of the gentle waves and the touch of the sea breeze brought back all the memories of the past few months. "Do you think he's happy now?" Alyssa asked, looking up at the sky. Emily nodded, her eyes glistening with tears, but with a serene smile on her face. "I'm sure he is. He finally found peace and his family." The two embraced, the sun casting a golden glow over the horizon in front of them, and the feeling that they were exactly where they were meant to be surrounded them. The past, with all its challenges and secrets, had been left behind, replaced by a new journey filled with love, compassion, and above all, hope. William, in some way, was still with them, not just in their memories, but in every step they took together, building a future he had dreamed of for them both. Life went on, now illuminated by new possibilities, and the love they had sought for so long had finally found them. With hearts full of longing and gratitude, they moved forward, knowing that William's legacy would live on, not just through his fortune, but in the bonds of love and friendship he had helped create.